So hello, welcome to Queer Conversations. This is week 4, Sexualization and Fetishization of our community. I am Matt. I am the Pride Club at SCC's president.
I'm Hannah, and I'm the PR manager for our club. We might be expecting a couple other people later on this video call, so be ready to hopefully see some more faces, but right now it's just us.
Mm-hmm. So I have a list of specific parts of this I want to talk about. Top of the list is lesbians, so if you want to go first.
Awesome. So the sexualization of lesbians is very common and very popular, and that's mostly because woman-on-woman sexual activity is very pleasing to cishet men, which is cisgender heterosexual men. And especially it seems to be like, honestly, some of the more conservative men and stuff will hate the community, but also be obsessed with women making out with other women. And it's just really frustrating to see so many lesbian couples like on TV and such. For the most part, most of the lesbian couples are two very feminine women who wouldn't look stereotypically gay at all, which of course is okay because not everybody looks stereotypically gay, but for that, it's normally so men can look at those lesbians and insert themselves into the relationship. Because you see, I don't know how often it is on TV shows and stuff where men see lesbians as a challenge, or they're just like, ooh, lesbians, maybe I'll have a three-way with them because it's two women and they can insert themselves. One of my shows that I've been rewatching again because it's very nostalgic for me is How I Met Your Mother, but it does not go without its criticisms. And the womanizer character, Barney, which is also kind of ironic because he's played by a gay man, but that's something else. One of the very popular, like during one of the episodes, he dresses up all like kind of feminine and puts on a weird voice, and he's just like, guys, tonight I'm picking up a lesbian. And like it's kind of funny, but it's also like, oh, that's not okay, because like he's purposely trying to go in there. And I feel like that one's also offensive to trans people, because there are trans lesbians, there are lesbians with male genitalia, as other people would say. There are lesbians with different genitalia. That happens, and that's awesome. But yeah, that comment there, it's not just basically any womanizing man in a lot of the shows that I've watched at some point mentions wanting to be with a lesbian couple, or like Barney in that one says, there's multiple types of women that go to a hardware store, and he lists some other types of women. He's like, lesbian couple who I can watch. And it's just things like that throughout TV and stuff, it seems like lesbians are women who like women for the benefit of men. They're not lesbians. They're just women kissing other women. And that happens a lot, and you see that with the obsession with lesbian porn. Oh my word, the obsession. And it's so frequent. I've read so many stories of people talking about like their homophobic dads who also watch lesbian porn. So like basically it ends up being that like gay people are great, or are terrible, but they're great for my pleasure. And so that happens a lot. Lesbian couples get catcalled a lot because men just think they can insert themselves into a relationship because they think that because of how our society has made men think that women are for their disposal, when men see two women together, they're just like, oh, two women for our disposal. Hi, Isabel.
Hi.
We're talking about how lesbians are sexualized right now.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, be careful with the kind of media you consume with that kind of stuff and be aware of that, because like I said, I still love watching How I Met Your Mother. You can still watch shows and be critical of them, but just be aware of that and be aware of what couples are actually representing lesbians and what couples are just there for men to look at and stuff, because it's very prominent. And I know that, like, having read some things from sex workers and stuff, they'll talk about how they're not actually gay. Some of them aren't even bi, but they have to do those lesbian porn stuff because it hits big, because men are obsessed with watching two women be with each other. So that's that.
Well, and that's also a two-way street, because a lot of straight women watch a lot of gay porn,
Yes.
and I know quite a few straight women, cishet women, who watch gay porn, and
Mhm.
it's not okay either. Gay men are catcalled a lot less because of, the patriarchy and everything,
Mhm.
but it is still an issue. Um, yeah.
Yeah, and even like myself, I was guilty of that in middle school. You know, the obsession in middle school with anime then leads to the obsession with yaoi. And I was only into it for about a few months because I started to realize that it wasn't okay. But not having seen anything about how it's just sexualizing gay men for our pleasure, you get so easily sucked into it because you're like, oh, they're so cute, it's so great. But it's not okay. Some stories can be okay because they do, like, it's not inherently bad to write about gay relationships, obviously, but so much of it is just what's always called smut for women. It's just cutesy gay men that have sex with each other so women can read it and be like, ooh, I like that. And I had a friend that even identified as a lesbian who was obsessed with yaoi up until the last time I knew her or anything. I'm not really friends with her anymore. But and um it's just so weird because I also have known, or at least known of, a lot of people who are obsessed with yaoi but are also homophobic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing that you have to face when it comes to sexualization and fetishization of everything is that just because it's not at the forefront of what people talk about doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So,
Yes.
so a lot of people recently have been talking about how lesbian porn maybe we should be taking steps back from making as much as we are, and maybe straight men shouldn't be watching it as much as they do. But a lot of people don't talk about what the same thing with gay men, or even I've come across things like two trans men, and I was like, that was confusing, but it turned out to be much more popular than I thought that it would have been. And it's just uh not okay.
Yeah, I've seen so many things online of, like, specifically, and I'm sure Matt can talk about this as well, but like specifically fetishizing like she males and stuff. Like, oh, it's so gross because people are just so obsessed with things that they find not normal. And like, once again, a lot of these people that are obsessed with having sex with a girl who has a penis, they don't actually care about trans people. They just are obsessed with that thing that they think is not normal and that they can hold power over. Like, I've seen like videos of that kind of stuff, that kind of porn, and it's not like appreciating them. It's on them and sexualizing them and objectifying them without even saying, like, none of those videos actually say these people are trans. They have all of these other derogatory names. Hi, Ren. For things that it's not actually like trans people having sex. It's sexualizing them and objectifying them in a really disgusting way.
Mm-hmm. And before we move on to a next point, so Aislinn is our secretary of the club, and Ren, who just joined, is our treasurer. And so to summarize for you two, we've just talked about sexualization and fetishization of lesbians and gay men in mostly in the porn industry, and then also we've started touching on trans fetishization. So the next point I have
The topic I know a
written
lot
down
about.
is actually trans people. So a lot of what I've seen personally is there are people who I mean, for one, there's the bi versus pan thing where people who typically identify as bisexual become attracted to a trans person, and they say that, oh, I'm pansexual because I'm attracted to a trans person. First of all, that's transphobic because it's saying that trans people are not, like trans men aren't real men or trans women aren't real women. And so that's not okay, but also it doesn't fit with bisexuality, and it's also just crappy.
Yeah, it was a whole movement of people saying that bisexual is attracted to cis people and pansexual is attracted to everybody. That's never been true, ever.
Mm-mm.
Back to the bisexual manifesto, it's never been true.
Mm-hmm. But also then
I'm
there's
sorry.
people.
I'm sorry.
What?
It's okay.
Okay. There's also the people who say that they're attracted to just genitalia, and that is in a sense okay, but at the same time you have to be really, really careful if that is you, because it's a really difficult stance to take, because I mean, then you run into the issues of accidentally fetishizing a trans person, or you get into a relationship with somebody you really like, and then it turns out that they're trans and you don't like those genitals, so you break up with them, and that makes them feel worse.
Mm.
And then there's also the people who are attracted only to trans people because they identify as one gender, but they have a different typically gendered set of genitals, and it for them it's a sexual fantasy or a fetish, and that's just not okay.
Yeah, me and my girlfriend had somebody that we talked to, and this conversation happened a long time ago, but she was talking about how she loved dick and that she loves women and she thinks they were beautiful, but she just could never be with them, except for maybe a pre-op trans woman, because then she would still have, like, she might still have that genitalia. And we're just like, ooh, just the way she was talking about it definitely did not mean she was really interested in them for who they are. She just thought that women were pretty, but she liked male genitalia too much to date women. So she would only be able to possibly date pre-transition, or if a trans woman decides to transition. Yeah.
So that just means she doesn't like women.
Yeah, I know.
So, because if you really don't like the idea of, like, this is going to get a little crude, of being like fingered or something like that, or like eaten out by a woman, then strap-ons exist, man. Like, if you really liked women that much and you were actually a lesbian, but you really didn't like that type of sex, which there's a whole spectrum of sex, which is something we could talk about later, then you can get a strap-on. You can do a million of things. Technology is amazing nowadays, guys. So obviously that girl, she didn't actually like women. She just liked the idea of women.
Yeah, and we, as Joy just pointed out, we explained to her all of that stuff. We're just like, there's ways like around that if you don't want to actually interact with traditionally female genitalia. There's ways around it. She's like, oh, I know, but I have to have the real thing.
It's not the same type of thing.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
It's then just, sexually you do not like women.
Yeah, exactly. It's weird.
As much as I agree with it's not the same thing argument. That's not an argument for transphobia just because you have a fetish like that.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Like, yeah, the fetishization of trans women specifically, I don't know if that word came out correctly. Trans women specifically in the porn industry is real nasty.
Yeah,
Like,
it is.
as someone who is pretty sexual and used to watch porn, I know how bad it is. Like,
Me too.
you don't even have to watch the majority of videos about trans women, and I'm going to try to be vague with details. You don't even have to watch the videos to see the transphobia for what it is, because a lot of videos and a lot of content creators use both T slurs and use the F slur when talking about trans women. And even if they're talking about a cis male within the context of a gay porno or one with a trans woman, there is still a lot of transphobia and homophobia directed at all parties.
Yeah.
Mhm. And
It's
that kind of
it's nasty.
also goes hand in hand with the fact that a lot of trans women are sex workers,
Mhm.
because that fetishization is such a big thing, and it's so hard for trans women to find jobs that are not in sex work, that
Yeah.
it just it's kind of a community thing at that point.
Mhm.
Even in sex work, there's some of the most abused populations in sex work, because I've done some, not super extensive, but I've done some study into the sex work industry because it's something that interests me. And honestly, the amount of beatings and killings that don't get reported is amazing, and even the ones that do, they're 10 times worse than anything I've ever seen in a cis woman or a cis man, which is just so tragic. And it's the same thing with trans men, not just trans women, but it's even less reported by trans men than it is by trans women.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's crazy. And
Trans men typically pass a lot better than trans women, so if you look at percentage murder rates, trans men are murdered even less than cis women.
Mm-hmm.
So that just shows you patriarchy bias.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy. And go ahead, Ren.
Okay. That's patriarchy bias as well as more fetishization, because I've seen a lot of fetishization. I think I keep mispronouncing that word, but it's
It's
okay.
okay.
In trans men, because especially among cis women, or cishet women, a lot, because they'll be like, oh, um, oh, pretty boy, but like also has the part I want, but like also masculine. And it's just gross, because it's like, if you're going there, you may as well just try out being with a butch lesbian, like, and stop your or transphobia. Come on.
Yeah, I just remembered, oh, good Lord. I talked to, like, a lesbian was talking to me one time. Well, it was way before I met Joy. And I found that this actually is a fairly large, disgusting community online of lesbians who say they'll date women, but they'll also date trans men. And they say, well, I'm still a lesbian because they might have a vagina. And I'm like, you can't. And I was trying to tell this person, like, that's not okay. You're completely invalidating. You're saying that trans men aren't actually men. You're saying they're just women who think they're men. And that's why you think you can date them. And she's like, well, no, I just think it's about the part. And I'm like, no. And I stopped talking to her. Like, after that, I'm like, oh, no. But that's, I've seen that. And I've also seen, I've seen that opposite, you know, with gay men saying they'll date trans women because they have the genitalia they want completely invalidating that. If you want to actually date men, then you're not a lesbian. And that's okay. If you want to date men, and trans men obviously falls under that, that's okay. But you cannot say that you are a lesbian who dates women and trans men, because that brings it down to genitalia, that invalidates trans people, that shows lesbians in a bad light, because so many people, there's also an entire community of people online that think lesbianism is inherently transphobic. A lot of people online get called TERFs, which is trans exclusionary radical feminists, which are also, those are crappy people. But lesbians will be called TERFs for simply being a lesbian, even if they've never said a transphobic thing in their life. And actually, I follow somebody on Instagram who says dozens of trans affirming things all the time, and she always gets called a TERF. And like, she'll say things about like all women and all women born women, and that means trans women. Trans women are born women. And she's explained that before. She was just like, I'm talking about trans women. And she still gets called a TERF all the time because people think lesbians are inherently transphobic because of those people that are like, I'm a lesbian, but I'll date trans guys as well. But never, and those people will also never date trans women because of the genitalia, and that's not okay.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with being bisexual.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's just another identity, and it anyway.
That one gets me riled up. Ugh.
Yeah.
Well,
So
and
if we want to move on to the next topic I have on my list, there's another one I need to add, but so since Ren is here now, do you want to
Hello?
talk about non-binary people?
Ooh. Okay. Yeah, I can. So I am, context about me. I'm non-binary, pansexual, and I'm currently dating a cis woman. So, okay. Transphobia with connected to relationships is one place that can start, and fetishization within that. So a lot of times I get transphobia from people who think that me and my girlfriend are a cis hair couple because I'm pretty masculine presenting most days. And so that's just weird. But on top of that, a lot of people will try to fetishize non-binary people in that sense, because they talk about, oh, non-binary people can't pick what they want to be, so they're just inherently weird and gross. I haven't heard that often, but I've heard it enough that it gets on my nerves. And so I've heard people say that. And within mainstream porn industry, there was no good LGBT representation. If you want representation within the porn industry, then you have to go to independent sex workers on OnlyFans and find the people that are non-binary or lesbian or gay or trans or what have you.
Mm-hmm. There's plenty of legitimate porn out there if you want to partake in that, which there's nothing inherently wrong with watching that kind of stuff, as long as it's healthy and not bad and what's the word, like men beating people. That's is porn, but that's not okay. But yeah.
And also, generally, when you see that, it's real. It's not being staged, and a lot of times, the people being beaten,
they don't know,
and they're trying to signal that they need help because this is not what they want, and the person doesn't stop, and they either are seriously injured permanently or they die.
Yep.
And it happens a lot.
Yeah. The porn industry is also real bad about sex trafficking, especially about underage girls.
Yeah.
That's another topic we can talk for hours about. Jeez.
Yeah. And something that Joy just brought up to me that I forgot to bring up when I was talking about specifically about lesbians is that butch lesbians butch and masculine lesbians, because masculine doesn't inherently mean butch, and vice versa. Butch lesbians have a very weird relationship with being sexualized and fetishized, because like there are also a lot of straight men and stuff that will sexualize butch women because it's an even harder challenge of, oh, this woman who completely goes against gender norms, I get to tear down and take over. But then recently they've been sexualized a lot by our own freaking community. I have seen so many TikToks and stuff recently. Like we follow a lesbian TikTok account that will post like lesbian TikToks, and normally they're hilarious. But I almost unfollowed them and blocked them the other day because they posted a TikTok of multiple TikToks showing butch lesbians being terrible and predatory exactly like men. Because one of them, the premise was, oh, I'm taking my girl, my straight friend who's tired of being hit on by guys to my lesbian bar. And then here come the butches about to go hit on them being all predatory. And everybody, I think I saw 2 comments out of the couple hundred comments saying, hey, that's not okay to say that butchers are gross and predatory. All of the other comments were like, OMG, I relate. Butchers are terrible and predatory and hit on girls whether they want to be hit on or not. And that is true for, you know, some people, but it is not true for all butchers. If you're going to be predatory, it doesn't matter what your identity is.
Yeah.
Especially within the community, because like anybody has the potential to be predatory, but no group itself is inherently predatory. Even cishet men and stuff are not inherently predatory. That's what society conditions them into thinking, that it's okay to do those things. Nobody is inherently predatory. And so I've seen that a lot recently, like, oh my God, so much of portraying butch and masculine lesbians and even masculine bi and pan women as being gross and predatory, and hitting on straight girls even when straight girls say no, and hitting on femme girls even though they say no, and like going in and trying to do that. And in my experience, and in most people's experiences, butch lesbians are the ones who are the scaredest of hitting on people because they feel like they're going to be seen as predatory. Joy knows this.
Mhm.
So
I was really scared about flirting with her when I first met her.
But yeah, that's something that's been happening a lot within the community recently, that we're, with that kind of thing, that's backtracking. Like, it's not okay.
Yeah. Matt, do you have anything about fetishization of pan and bi people on the?
I do.
okay.
But next up is intersex people.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this is one you don't see a whole lot because the population of intersex people is lower, but it's prominent enough that we know it exists. Basically, it's very similar to the trans arguments, that it's about genitalia, or it's the she-male thing, which I think is even more prominent with intersex people, because the most of the intersex people who know they're intersex have both sets of genitalia or something like that, some visual knowledge that they are intersex, whereas most people who actually are intersex don't have that, and so they don't know. But that's a conversation for another day. But it's basically a lot of the same things with trans people, but worse.
Yeah.
Another part of discrimination and fetishization against intersex people is when intersex people who are clearly intersex and shouldn't be forced to conform are forced to conform to male stereotypes or female stereotypes, and are shoved into one box or the other, with like being made to present masculine or feminine and etc. And then they also get pushed into heteronormative culture, which can be pushed into very predatory states. Yeah, it's bad. I've heard stories about it.
So something to note is that although we don't see it maybe as much in America, it is a lot more prominent in other cultures. There's like, if you look into it, you can find it. It's usually not under like intersex porn or intersex whatever. It's usually you see a lot of stuff where it's like, I can't think of the word off the top of my head, but
And there's hermaphrodite.
yeah, there's hermaphrodite. That's actually just depends on the country you're in. That can be proper in some countries and not, but it usually isn't in the US. But
And just a reminder to anybody watching, that is a word that we don't use anymore because it is outdated.
Yeah, it's outdated. Some countries still use it. If you hear somebody using it, correct them if you feel comfortable. But it's one of those things where it's still being filtered out of our language right now. So you do still hear it quite often. But yeah, it's definitely a pretty big problem still. But people have found different words to get around being as offensive, I think. But there is a lot of interest in people with more than one genitalia. Most of it is animated. I haven't seen any form of it, but there's a lot of animated porn of it that can, and it becomes a real problem because people will then seek out these people and fetishize real living people, which is kind of another thing just to quickly touch on. If you're watching animated porn and you think that what you're watching isn't bad because it's animated, that is not true, because it leads to people seeking out real life people, which is why you see a lot of hentai of underage people, and people say it's okay when it's still not okay. It's still not, because real people, real pedophiles make and watch these things, and it makes them think that it is okay in real life, and it gives them this false sense of reality, which will make them then go on to abuse real life children. So that's why it's not okay.
Yeah, I think just kind of like what you were saying, Aislinn, I think unfortunately a lot of what the sexualization and fetishization of everybody in the community, lesbian, gay, trans, bi, intersex people, all for so many people comes down to being obsessed with things that to them aren't normal. And it's so upsetting because who cares if it's not normal to you? That doesn't mean you get to use it for your own pleasure.
Yeah.
Kind of like the, sorry.
Continue.
Okay. Kind of like the stereotype-ish that a lot of straight girls have about wanting to have a gay best friend.
Exactly, yeah.
Wanting something that isn't inherently normal in your life and then seeking it out and almost making it into a toxic relationship.
Yeah, I think that's a great example of a non-sexual, like, cultural fetish, if that makes sense, because, yeah, you see that all the time of, like, girls like, oh my god, I want my gay best friend to give me recommendations and do all this. It's like, ooh, that's not okay either. Just because you're not sexualizing them doesn't mean you get to objectify them. It's still not okay.
Non-sexual discrimination and fetishization is just as bad as sexual in almost all scenarios. Yeah.
So our next topic is bisexuality and pansexuality. So Ren, do you want to start us off with that?
Yeah, I can. I actually had a couple points in my mind when I asked that question. So the first one is the stereotype. It's both. Okay, no, there's multiple points to this. Sorry. The stereotype that bisexual and pansexual people are just greedy and they just want multiple people and they want multiple whatever have you. Same.
Or the cheaters.
Yeah. Same stereotype with polyamorous people, but to different extents. Also the fetishization that whenever you like when a couple meets a bi goal and the guy's instantly like, oh, hey, wanna have a threesome? Like stuff like that. It's just real gross because it happens so often to bisexual and pansexual people. Thank you. It's happened so often to bisexual and pansexual people of both genders, all genders. I'm off my game today. And so it's just real weird.
All right, so we have 10 minutes left.
So I'll continue with the bisexual, pansexual thing. I'm also, I'm biromantic asexual. So it makes things a little bit more complicated for me, but I was bisexual for years. So I do have a lot of input on these things. One of our biggest problems is threesomes. I'm pretty sure anybody who's in the community and knows anything about bisexual people knows that every bisexual person has been asked to have a threesome, usually by a straight man. Are you okay with that?
Very crackly and loud all of a sudden.
Your mic
good
just
now.
died and exploded for a second.
Microphone, but keep using my nice gaming headphones.
Still having some trouble.
Gosh darn it.
I think you're okay now.
Yeah, I think.
I think your microphone got all its energy out.
Okay, it just had a little,
Yeah.
problem.
Had a little breakdown.
Me too, though.
Woo.
But yeah, so the biggest problem that bisexual and pansexual people face is people asking for threesomes. And I know that a lot of lesbians face this too, and gay men. But I do find that usually it's 2 women and 1 man. But that is not always the case. So please know that if you're asking 2 men to have sex with 1 woman, that is just as bad if it's not like, they're obviously not asking for it. But people have come up to me at parties and said, hey, you want to have a threesome? When it was completely unprompted too, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think that inherently, since you're bisexual, you are more sexual as well, which is another problem, that they're like, you'll have sex with different, like different genders and different gender orientations and stuff like that. So therefore, you are a very sexual person. And like people are constantly coming to you and asking you questions about like sex and stuff like that. And obviously I said that I'm asexual now, so I did not know a lot about that when I was bisexual. But it was a huge problem where people come up to you and they ask you all these questions and they want to know all these things. What they don't understand is that in that case, they're fetishizing you, because not every bisexual and pansexual person knows about these things or wants to. I know a lot of very vanilla bisexual and pansexual people that people go up to them and automatically think that they constantly have threesomes and want to have sex all the time and that they're super horny. And that's just not the case.
Yeah. Being capable of being attracted to all genders does not mean you want to have sex with every single person. Just being gay doesn't mean you find every man attractive. Just like being a lesbian doesn't mean you find every woman attractive. It's just the genders that you are attracted to.
And another thing I found is that I was not allowed to have a preference either, is that like, so cis women, they're like, oh, that guy's not my type. If I said something like that, they'd be like, that doesn't make sense. Aren't you bisexual? And it's like, yeah, but like, I just look at that guy.
Yes, but we still have standards.
It's like a standard thing. I'm just not attracted to some people.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have standards.
Yeah.
I was sexual at the time, so I wasn't actually sexually attracted to anyone. But so they'd be like, oh, do you want to sleep with that guy over there? And I'd be like, why the heck would I want to do that? and then they'd get all offended. And it's like, well, it's just, people are allowed to have standards and preferences no matter what.
Yeah.
I've experienced that too myself, and I've seen it happen, especially since coming out as bi early in high school and then later coming out as pan, like sometime when junior, senior year. I've experienced that a lot, in that people in my life, close friends, have known me to be a sexual person, which isn't bad, but I've also had strangers learn this about me and then learn I'm bi or pan and go, oh, hey, obviously he wants to do the do with everyone he sees because he's pan. And I'm just like, okay, A, not true. B, just because I am sexual and open doesn't mean I want to be open and sexual with you.
Especially
That's-
after that comment.
Yeah.
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 Is there anything else that you wanted to mention real quick, Matt? Because I have one other thing.
Yes, we're also down to 4 minutes and 45 seconds. The last one I have on my list is asexuality. So I am also
Demisexual?
biromantic ace. The thing with asexuality is it's like you said before about lesbians, where it's like a challenge type thing.
Yeah.
God, yeah.
A lot of asexual people think that they're broken because the norm is being sexually attracted to people, and asexual people don't have that. We don't really need that, and a lot of people will even say, "Oh, that's sad," or something like that. That's what I've heard people say, and it's not. It means that we're just less focused on it. We don't really care, and it's like I said, it's a challenge thing where people are like, "Oh, I can fix you," and that's no. If
It's even
anything, you're
worse-
gonna traumatize them.
Exactly.
It's even worse for
You're
asexual
not
men
fixing
too.
anything. Rape doesn't
Yeah.
fix anything. It's just traumatizing people.
And a lot of people don't view coercing an asexual person into sex as rape, but
It is.
But it is.
It is.
apparently is part of rape. So
It is.
about that next time you want to challenge, and maybe don't.
Yeah.
Even if someone is just sorry.
Nobody's a challenge. Just if offer it, bring it up safely in a good way, not like the describing. If they say no, that's your answer. Don't push it.
If you
Yeah.
have to coerce them and
It's
they
rape.
don't want to, that is rape. It is if they don't say yes, that means no.
Yes. Sex is not a challenge, and it shouldn't be. So therefore, if it is a challenge, it does not make you more of a man. It makes you less of a man. Also, it makes you less of a woman or less of a non-binary person. But I do find that most of the time it's cis men or cis women that try to coerce you. But obviously,
It
that's
also makes you a criminal.
yes.
Yeah.
So remember that next time you try to pressure anyone into sex, no matter what, it shouldn't be hard. If it's hard, it's not good.
That also goes for if someone is on the ace or demi spectrum without just being fully ace. Like if someone is demisexual, demi meaning they need to have a very strong platonic and or romantic attraction before they want to fiddle. So if your partner is demi in any sense, whether it's just they want to have a basic understanding of the person, or they want to be in a relationship for a few months or a year before they have sex, and you force them into that before they're ready, then that is still rape and you are still a bad partner.
Yeah. Okay. So
We have a minute 30 left.
Hannah is
I
what
can
you
do
have
it.
quick.
I can do it. Okay, so something else that really set us back, the entire community back, was the for sexualization, was the HIV and AIDS crisis, because that was really another big wave of starting that all gays are promiscuous and have sex with everybody and have unprotected sex. And so that's something that set our entire community back with that. And like coming out to my older relatives, I've literally had to step by step explain to them that me being gay does not inherently mean I am attending orgies and doing heroin, because that's
1 minute.
so that's just something else that we can talk about more deeply in another one, but that the crisis really just bonked us back decades. So yeah.
All right, and so that concludes this week's episode. Let's pick next week's topic really quick. We have less than a minute. So these are the topic options that we have.
Okie dokie. So who's going to be with us next week?
I don't know.
I am.
I can.
I can try to be on earlier next week. This week was just weird for me.
I'll try to make Annie come next week too, so we can have a bigger group. One thing I want to add to our list, if it's not already on there, is queer baiting.
Yeah.
So just remember that.
All All right, so we're recording again. Sorry our video cut out. So we're going back to looking at panel topics. So did we decide on homosexuality and promiscuity?
Yes, I think so, because that's different enough that we can go ahead and talk about some different things with that. Do we want to say the plan for the next couple videos that we have as well?
Yeah. So the vague plan for now is I think that we're going to do the J.K. Rowling and how to deal with liking Harry Potter but not Rowling next after that. And then so I think that's just all we have lined up. We figured that will be a little bit lighter than our past topics. And so that might be kind of fun, light. We can give you recommendations for good things to read. We can give you recommendations for good people to buy from, where to buy from, what to do if you don't want to support J.K. Rowling, because she does get a little bit of money from every single thing you buy that's licensed. And so we can give you recommendations for artists and stuff like that. Who knows, maybe if any of us have an Etsy or something, we can draw a little something, make a little sticker that you can purchase from us, and that will give you a way to support us a little bit.
Yeah,
so let's save that for that video.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think something we're going to start doing now that we have a few of these done, if there's any topics that you would like us to discuss or like us to put on our list that you don't see on our list already, go ahead and leave that in the comments, because these are for people who want education. These are for your benefit. They benefit us because we love talking to each other and we love researching these problems and learning more, but this is for your benefit to whoever's watching. So if you have something that you want us to talk about, go ahead and leave that down. You can also go to our Instagram, which is also just Pride at SCC, I think, or SCC Pride. Let me see. Yeah, the @ is just Pride SCC. I don't know if you can see that. It's just no spaces, no dots, Pride SCC, all lowercase. You can comment on the posts that I made there. So tell us what you want to see.
All right. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.